Again, Gerald Abila is an attorney. He's the founder and executive director of Barefootlaw. Gerald believes that access to law and justice are fundamental building blocks of a just, equitable, and thriving society, and that technology has a significant role to play in ensuring equal access to justice. In the past, Gerald has been named the Legal Rebel. This is an award by the American Bar Association for his use in technology to transform global legal practice. He has received other honors from 100 leading legal consultants and strategists in the world for 2018 by the Lord Dragon in New York. So we could never have had a better person than Gerald. Join me again, Gerald, the people in welcoming Gerald. Gerald, you're very welcome. Normally for keynote speeches, you don't give that time, but Gerald, allow me to give you at least 15 minutes to beat that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those that have been in the dungeons, you understand what it means to hustle. Do things. And I'll start off with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they hate you, then they fight you, and then you win. It just occurred to me because of the scarce resources in terms of time. But yeah, I'll try to be a lot informal, I would say, and just try to engage in a conversation about things as I see them when it comes to access to justice, innovation, and the law. I'd prepared a few pictures so I don't bore you with my face throughout the presentation. In case you get tired of looking at me, just look at the slides. Just 1 second while it gets sorted out. In the meantime, let's not forget to say a special thank you to the caterers for the wonderful lunch. I can see we are full, that's for sure. Do you have a... Okay, I'll just signal. I would like to start by welcoming everyone here today. I would like to, it's for me in my mind, it's a bit of nostalgia, seeing where we've come from since 2017 to where we are going. And I look forward to LAICON2 1000, if there is any such year, where Barefootlaw, LastNet, the DGF, JLOS, and HEAL will work towards a conference of that kind. And again, I would like to thank those that spoke in the morning, starting off with the Honorable Chief Justice Ladit. Ladit is a title, Owinj Dolo. Thank him for taking off his time to come here today. It was indeed wonderful and fruitful. And with him at the helm of the judiciary, from what he discussed, especially his focus being on access to justice and doing things differently, I see a bright future, not only for access to justice, not only for the judiciary, but for the sector as a whole. And if he was here, I know he's probably following us online because the conference is being streamed live. For me, what would really be wonderful as part of his legacy when it comes to access to justice is that he places innovation at the forefront of his approaches. And when his term comes to an end, at least the judiciary will have an innovative mindset in the way it does things. The opening speakers, Ambassador Black. Ambassador Black is a friend of not only Barefootlaw, but a friend of the justice sector. For those that have gone to The Hague or to the EU on access to justice related work. And I think she was at the HEAL conference in February, representing Uganda, and she has done a good job. I had a conversation with her at the last Innovating Justice Forum, where we talked about making Uganda the justice capital of Africa, just like Netherlands or The Hague is the justice capital of the world. And I know she's watching, she had to leave. But I would like to tell her this is the first small steps in that process of making Uganda the justice capital of the world. To Her Excellency, Dr. Roswitha, I hope I get that name correct. She's also watching, and whose remarks set the tone for our discussion today. There's something the Chief Justice spoke about in the morning that caught my attention. Like him, I come from a village where there are no lawyers. I come from Kole. In fact, there are about 2 or 3 lawyers that I know in Kole that are engaged in legal aid. One of them is here, Isaac Otim. And his story about people in his community having to walk or having to travel 160 kilometers to access justice reminded me of a story of Pasculina, and I'll get to that later. It's stories like this that get us on this path to try and think differently, to resolve issues like this. And I know he's watching, and I know some representatives of the judiciary are here. And when he mentioned that, it caught my attention as an innovator. And I was thinking, but why should people travel 160 kilometers to access justice? And to me, the innovator in me came out, and I saw it as a challenge. And it's a challenge that I, on behalf of Barefootlaw, are willing to take. And the promise to him, to the judiciary, and to the access to justice space in Uganda is that in the next 1 year, people in my village, people in his village, will not have to travel 160 kilometers to access a court or to access a lawyer. It's a challenge I call upon other innovators to take on, but within a year, let's use this as an opportunity to demonstrate the powers of innovation. My talk today is, first go back, I'll just take this out. I also may get a bit sleepy standing here on the podium. My talk today is COVID-19 and the new normal, and the new access to justice normal. Everyone has talked about the new normal. Everyone has talked about the disruption that this COVID pandemic has given us. But in my talk, you'll come to see this disruption is both a gift and a curse, and we shouldn't look at it in one way. Globally, and I've talked a bit of that in terms of the Chief Justice's presentation this morning. The situation around access to justice globally is dire. In so many communities, individuals are left to the mercy of the system because they cannot access justice. And because of this, they've been denied an opportunity to thrive, an opportunity to realize their full potential, an opportunity that has been denied because of a breakdown in the rule of law. And when this happens, that is what you start seeing from a global point of view. A report was released by the World Justice Index about, I think 2016, 2017, I don't recall the year, that said 5.1 billion people around the world face justice problems, and of these 1.5 billion cannot get a solution to these problems. And now this is from a global perspective. The situation in Uganda is no different. Hill released the Justice Needs Report, and the Chief Justice mentioned it again today in the morning, which said about 8 in 10 people, that's about 80% of people, have experienced a justice need in the past 4 years. When you come to think of this, these appear statistics, they appear numbers that are far away from us, but these are individuals. These are people. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people on these 3 tables. On these 3 tables here that you're seeing, on these 4 tables, only these 2 do not have justice problems. All these will have experienced a justice problem in the past 4 years. That's the situation in Uganda. And I want us to bring that down to reality, to you and me, to the person. And these are some of the stories. And like I mentioned earlier, a story of Pascaulina, when the Chief Justice was in his talk talking about how far he had to travel, or how far people in his village had to travel to access justice, about 160 kilometers. Pascaulina had to travel 90 kilometers from Oyam to attend a high court session in Lira. There are days she would come with 2 or 3 witnesses, reach the court, and the session has been adjourned. And she has to travel back 90 kilometers and wait for the next hearing. On the surface of it, these are statistics, but people's lives are getting affected. And this situation has been compounded by the COVID pandemic. You're all familiar with what happened to the church, but probably because that happened in a place where we all have access to, a place that the media has access to. Imagine what's happening around the world where the cameras don't exist. That's the situation in which we live. In 2017, we had LAICON2. Now, LAICON2 was an interesting conversation we had with our partners, LASPNet and the DGF as well. Barefootlaw was receiving a lot of international recognition by then. And so we came back with some of these ideas and went to the DGF. This was actually in 2014. We went to the DGF and told them, look, there's a lot happening in Uganda that needs to be showcased. Hopefully it will convince people to start adopting different ways of access to justice, of doing things. The DGF looked at us, a very young organization, no systems in place, but with big dreams. And they said, you do have big dreams, but this is something you cannot pull off on your own. And so the DGF, in their wisdom, and to this day, I'm very grateful, they got us in touch with partners that brought on the technical expertise. LASPNet, who've been so helpful and have to see this come to light, Hill, JLOS, and other partners that have seen this to fruition. Thank you for persisting with this. At least now we can see the fruits. When we started in 2017, you can see the theme. It was simply a showcase. That's because in 2017, technology and innovation was seen as something on the sidelines. Cool things that people were doing that were not mainstream. In fact, most of the opposition we faced in trying to get things done differently, including in organizing LAICON 2017, was people were simply not embracing it. Those that were embracing it out of curiosity to come and see exactly what it is. But fast forward, I'll just mention a story about Richard Susskind before we come to 2020. Susskind is he's an interesting guy. He's the pioneer when it comes to legal innovation or legal tech worldwide. In 1996, and this was in 1996, it's not long ago, he told people that at some point in the near future, emails would be the primary means of communication between lawyers and their clients. He was almost disbarred by the Bar Association of England and Wales. Today, it's a no-brainer. We're all testament to the role that email plays when it comes to access to justice. If I was to be asked a question, if someone had told me that in 2020 we would have a judgment delivered by email in an issue as contentious as ownership of a political party, like it happened yesterday, I would have slapped someone back then. And yet yesterday, was it yesterday? Yesterday, a judgment was delivered on a very contentious matter, and it was delivered by email. That's how far technology and innovation have come when it comes to access to justice. But today I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm not here to talk about the present. I hope if there is one thing you can take from my presentation, it's in how we are going to try and navigate ourselves into the future, to LAICON 21,000, like I mentioned earlier. We're all familiar with what's going on, unless of course you live in either Mars or in North Korea. The situation around this pandemic has disrupted everything we're doing, including when it comes to access to justice. What started off as a health crisis has gone on to become an economic crisis, and it's now becoming a rule of law crisis. The chief, I think, was it Madame Black who mentioned it? We are seeing a number of civil unrest that are rising because of reactions to the COVID pandemic. And unless we went through, I think, 6 or 7 months of a lockdown as a country, courts were not operating normally, prisons were full, and unless the system can do things differently, unless the system adopts a different way of doing things, we're likely to see the same system, that's the justice system, be overrun by a huge number of cases that have arisen. Our data at Barefootlaw shows a lot of these cases, and kudos to the innovators, you're responding to the right things. A huge number of these cases are around what we all know, domestic violence, child abuse, but there are cases around crime that are rising as well, cases economic in nature, cases around domestic, I already mentioned that, but also cases around land that are rising. And the system may be overwhelmed if it does not respond, and if it does not respond quick to this. So it's the beauty, the beauty is, like I said, the COVID pandemic has been both a gift and a curse. A curse, we're all familiar with that side of things, but a gift in that it has forced us to think. It has forced everyone to think like an innovator. What am I going to do with 2,000 shillings? I have lunch to buy, I have transport to office, I have an app to develop, but I have only 2,000 shillings. What am I going to do with it? So I want you to think of it this way. The entire justice, law, and order sector, as a result of the COVID pandemic, has 2,000 shillings. And they have to buy food, they have to get transport, they have to develop an app, and they have to develop a solution when it comes to access to justice. And some of these solutions have enabled us to realize the power of what already exists. The easiest or the most visible being the mobile phones that we have before us. Internet. Everyone in the morning was talking about the virtual courts, the Zoom sessions. And the laptops in a way, because now judges are using the laptops to conduct Zoom hearings. These are things that existed before, but correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of us used our laptops mostly for Facebook and for email. And now there's something called Zoom, and we have to check what a webcam looks like, and we have to make sure it's off when we're going to the toilets on a Zoom session. We are all now familiar with how to use these gadgets, which was not the case 7 months ago. And that's the gift I'm talking about when it comes to the COVID pandemic. Globally, by 2025, it's estimated 1 billion of the 1.5 billion people facing a justice need will have access to mobile phones. So there is no solution you're going to develop around access to justice that is innovative, that uses technology, that will ignore this fact. The situation is not any different in Uganda. In fact, I think it's about 70% of Ugandans have access to mobile phones. according to the UCC studies. Of course, some people have 2 SIM cards. In Ghana, I think there are more mobile phones than the population, so penetration is over 100%. So it's 70%, but whether they're individual or not is not a subject of this conversation. The beauty with these gadgets, the beauty with the internet, the beauty with the mobile phone, and the beauty with solutions that come up from that is we can extract big data. When I talk of big data, I would like you to differentiate it from micro data. Names, age, sex, biodata, no. Big data is an aggregate of a lot of data. And this is where I think the future is when it comes to access to justice. A friend of mine runs an innovation that uses big data from mobile phones to predict famines, that uses big data to predict populations, that uses this same big data to predict droughts. And the solution is simple. Your mobile phone always looks for a mast to operate on. So in some of these upcountry areas, these masts are located near water points. And in some of these areas, these masts are also located around World Food Program stores. So when the mobile phone activity around the water point or the mobile phone activity around the World Food Program store increases and people are walking a longer distance, maybe that is a sign of an impending famine. And maybe the government can use that fact to come up with an intervention before it becomes too serious. The same can be used in the justice space. We can use this big data to make smart predictions and to better allocate these resources, considering because of the COVID pandemic, we all have 2,000 shillings in our pocket. So how do we allocate it in ways that makes a lot of sense and in ways that is beneficial to everyone? But like I mentioned earlier, my talk today is about us trying to see what the future is and generally thinking about what role we can play to get to that future. What do we need to do as individuals? What do we need to do as stakeholders? What do we need to do as sectors in order for us to get to that future? Because realistically, the past or the old normal is dead. In terms of thinking, I'll start off with the judiciary and the court system. The courts, and kudos to them, are coming up with a number of innovations that are very helpful. A few years ago, I would never have thought that this would be something the judiciary would adopt. But today, their key focus is on an electronic system. But going forward into the future, the world is changing. Amazon itself resolves a lot more disputes, and I stand to be corrected. Either now or in the near future, an institution or a company like Jumia will be resolving a lot more disputes than the Ugandan courts combined. And this is electronic dispute resolution, EDR. So in light of EDRs, what is the new role of courts? In that future, the courts have to rethink, go back to the drawing board and think what their role is. Their role is going to be more as a facilitator for some of these dispute resolutions, in addition to ADRs, the alternative dispute resolutions that they do. Courts are going to be an enabler in the very near future, and this has been accelerated because of the COVID-19 pandemic. When it comes to law schools, and I'm glad I saw a few of my lecturers here. I think they attended the morning session. I'm glad some law schools like Makerere and Strathmore Law School at the forefront of this, at the forefront of getting law students to think, while still law students, how things can be done differently, to plant that seed of innovation and creative thinking while they are still going through law school. One interesting thing about law school is we all started off as activists when we joined law school in year one, and we all wanted to change the world. By fourth year, you had two categories of people, activists and wannabe politicians. By the time we left LDC, we all wanted to make money. Forget activism, forget politics, where is the money? So what we want from law schools is, by the time that student graduates from fourth year or from LDC, the primary question they should be asking is, how can I do things differently to enhance access to justice? And the things can be taught. Benchmark Makerere, benchmark Strathmore. Some of the biggest universities around the world are really not doing anything much when it comes to this front. Private practice. When we started Barefootlaw in 2013, 2012, while still as a law student, but then in 2013, when we formally registered it, I remember there was a hierarchy. There was a class system when it comes to legal practice. You had the judges of the Supreme Court at the top, and then other judges in that hierarchy, and then commercial lawyers, and then criminal lawyers, and then us, when it came to legal aid, were at the real bottom. At the real bottom, even beyond, what was the grade? The magistrates that were for those that know your emojis. But yeah, I'm glad the attitudes are changing. And these are things that, as private practice, we need to enhance. And it starts with the bar associations. They need to work towards changing mentalities. Don't be like the bar association in Britain when Susskind in 1996 told them about the email. Instead, embrace the new Susskins of today, and they're all over the place, and encourage private practitioners to look at their approaches and use that to the benefit of their client. I mean, there are even people willing to pay. It doesn't always have to be free. And I assure you one thing when it comes to private practice, at some point in future, and I think it starts now, it's going to be you either innovate or you die. There is not going to be room for the old way in which things were being done. There's not going to be room for, I was told by a friend, thank God it's in another jurisdiction, that the law is a cartel. Me personally, I don't believe the law is a cartel, but I was told the law is a cartel. And especially law societies, not in Uganda, but in other parts of the world, are so protective of their practice that anything that tries to come from the sides that is going to likely disrupt the status quo is rejected. And you will be surprised, one of the biggest culprits when it comes to this is the United States of America, where legal aid is so restricted. Law societies have to adopt. That's when it comes to private practice. And when it comes to the funders, I like that category because they enable us to do what we are doing and to do it well. The old normal is gone. The new normal, from your side of things, means you need to improve on the way in which you fund. Start looking at budgets for R&D. Because like Susskind again said, there is no evidence from the future. These are things you do, you fail, you do again until you get it done. So if you have a restricted budget when it comes to an innovation, chances are high it won't work. And it also restricts the growth of the organization. When it comes to civil society, we need to cooperate. And a good example of a collaboration that's trying to enhance or change this is Barefootlaw, LASPNet, JLOS, HEAL, and the DGF. We need to collaborate. Access to justice is not a one-man show. This is not the wild, wild west where one guy goes on a horse in a town and kicks out all the bad guys. This is an entire sector of which 5.1 billion people globally are facing a challenge. But as we're doing this, of course, technology sometimes appears to, it's like organizations as well. I was telling someone, on the outside, all you see is the glamour, but you have no idea what it takes on the inside for something like this to take place, for some of those awards to be won. Same happens to technology. When we stand here and talk about technology and innovation, it appears like it's the silver bullet to everything. But I'm glad Her Excellency mentioned it in the morning. Rachel, I think, mentioned it as well. These things are a gift and a curse, and I guess that's how it is for everything around the world. There are two ways to look at it. When it comes to technology, our approaches have to try and limit what we call the unintended consequences of this technology. We have to make sure everyone is included. I'm so passionate about inclusivity. And one of the criteria, at least for me as an individual, when it came to selecting some of your innovations in the vetting committee was, does this innovation build community? Does it build community, or is it one of these Instagram sheds, apps that are out there? When it comes to innovation, let's make sure everyone is included, and that's inclusivity. Let's also be careful when it comes to dissemination of misinformation and disinformation. I'll go back to the judgment that I mentioned earlier. I think there was the day before the famous email judgment came in, there were already copies of judgments going out, and these were agitating people. And that all turned out to be misinformation and disinformation. And the thing is, with us as lawyers, when we say something, the public has a high likelihood to believe because we are lawyers and it's coming from us. So be very careful the type of information that you disseminate. Of course, the approaches have to be based on human rights. And I think that is self-explanatory. It's a sector in which we are. And of course, we have to respect the privacy of the people that contact us, because at the end of the day, these are people. And we have regulations we're operating at. Innovators that are using tech, at least one of your servers, or at least one of your servers is based in the EU. Are you complying with the GDPR? When it comes to Uganda, are you complying with the Data Protection and Privacy Act? You know the regulations are out. So make sure some of the things are followed when you're approaching this. Before I conclude, I'll just like to highlight a few observations. Observation number one is always make sure your innovation is inclusive. Number two is don't fail to try. Number three is try and try and try again. And finally, and this may be a bit controversial because I've been one of the biggest advocates of tech. But this COVID-19 pandemic marks the death of legal tech. Yeah, but it marks a golden era for legal innovation. So legal tech, as you know, it is dead. Welcome to a golden age of legal innovation. And by this, I mean, if you go back to the story I mentioned about Richard Susskind in 1996, he said, look, there will come a time when everyone will use emails as a primary means of communication. Do we have any email lawyers here? Because email has become so notorious that it's a by the way. The same will happen to some of these technologies like the virtual video conferencing, video judgments, remote working, things that were so futuristic a few months ago are now mainstream. We don't even think about them anymore. You can't come and say, for me, I'm a specialist in Zoom law. And yet before, you would say I'm a specialist when it comes to virtual courts or virtual. Today, it's so common that it's like emails in 96. But when it comes to legal innovation, and again, I would like to highlight the innovation by LDC. That's a very basic and yet very effective innovation dealing with a very pertinent problem. What does it use? Megaphones. There is no fancy app. It's so easy to replicate. It's so easy to scale. And this is the future. You're going to see a lot of these kinds of innovations coming up and expanding again. And that, to me, is a clear direction of the future. But finally, as I end, the thing with these technologies is, it creates a shield between us and those that we operate with, between us and the beneficiaries. For those that understand a bit of code, our beneficiaries are zeros and ones. But when this happens, and I want to stress it here again, always maintain your empathy. Don't forget your empathy. Technology appears to bring us proximate, near to each other, but at the same time, it also tends to create a distance. These, at some point, may end up being statistics or messages, but at the end of that line are people, and people who depend on these people. Never lose your empathy, no matter how many cases you're handling using these gadgets, because it is empathy that got us on this path in the first place. It is empathy that carries us through this path. It is empathy that got us through LAICON 2017, and it's empathy that will get us to LAICON 21,000. If there is one word I'll leave with you: empathy, community, humanity, even when it comes to the gadgets that you use, because at Barefootlaw, the ultimate law for us is humanity. And I hope that makes sense for you as well. Thank you.